After being in love for 7 years, Tina still calls me by her first love's name when she's drunk. Eric, please don't leave me, she'll say. I gently reply, then remove her hearing aid and call her Linda. She always thought I was so deeply in love with her that I'd gladly play the role of a substitute. That was until Linda, who was supposed to be dead for 7 years, suddenly came back. When she saw the divorce papers I handed to her, Tina's eyes turned red. You never loved me, did you? She asked. Of course not, I said with a soft smile. Is there nothing you want to say to me? She pushed further. I simply thanked her for the $5 million. Without it, I'd never have found her. The day Eric's divorce news reached back home, I was accompanying Tina to a follow-up appointment at the hospital. Her hearing had suffered permanent damage, and she still couldn't walk. Yet when she heard the news that the one who caused all this had returned, there was joy in her usually indifferent eyes. Later that night, she got drunk. With glazed eyes, she held my hand and murmured, Eric, since you're back this time, don't leave again. I obediently agreed, all right, I won't leave you. But her gaze shifted, fading as it rested on me. You're not Eric, she accused. I froze. Tina picked up a small blanket from her wheelchair and tossed it at my face. Do you think having Eric's face makes you him? How dare you, Ben, she spat. If you have nothing else, just leave. Her tone was calm but firm. The blanket was light, but the shame hit me like a slap. Took me back to years ago. When I was 18, on the eve of my art exam, Tina's first love, Eric, tore up my paintings. He used a small silver hammer inlaid with jewels to crush my fingers until they broke. Even after they healed, whenever I picked up a brush, my hand would tremble uncontrollably. I could never paint again. Tina, Eric's defender, came to me after the incident. She slid a check across the table. If it's not enough, name your price. I held my shaking hand, suppressing the urge to yell. What's the point of giving me money? My dreams and my future are gone because of him. And then Tina laughed. She looked at me with a mix of softness and disdain. Take it. Isn't that what your so-called dreams are about? Just getting more money? At just 23, she was already the youngest in power at Tina. She looked down on me completely. None of us, not even the others around Tina, could have predicted that 2 years later, I'd marry her. On my 20th birthday, Linda had been serving in law enforcement for 4 years. She went missing after a mission to rescue citizens kidnapped by pirates, ending up in the open sea. The government searched for a month but never found her. Everyone said she was gone. During those months of confusion and near mental breakdown, I spotted her in a blurry photo on a hidden overseas site. Though the image was unclear, instinct told me it was Linda. But finding her through that was like searching for a needle in a haystack. I needed a lot of money. Around this time, Eric left the injured Tina behind and went abroad to get married. Once healed, Tina found me. Eric returned in the late hours a week later. Tina had sent someone to wait at the airport all day and bring him back. He looked worn, far from the triumphant figure who'd left. His stubborn expression softened slightly. Tina, you actually remembered me. When his gaze met mine in the corner, he froze, before nearly screaming in disbelief. Ben, you pathetic stand-in. What are you doing here? I stared back silently. Tina replied calmly, he's my husband now. Eric couldn't believe it, his eyes reddening as he demanded an explanation. What does this mean, Tina? You said you'd wait for me forever. Now what? You like someone like him? Still defiant, he stood there, his face bearing a fragile beauty, similar to mine by about 70%. Push me over, Tina instructed me. With the wheelchair in front of Eric, Tina held his hand gently. Eric, with you gone so long, of course I missed you, she sighed. He's just a cheap stand-in, don't worry about him. Realizing my role as merely a substitute, Eric picked up a cup of steaming water and splashed it on my face, asking, since I'm back, does it bother you if I dislike this fake face? Tina kept her gaze on Eric, showing no concern for me. Of course not, she said. The liquid trickled down my neck, soaking my shirt, leaving a burning sensation on my skin. The pain was almost unbearable. Playing the victim again? Eric sneered at me, revolted. Only then did Tina spare me a glance. Her brows slightly knit. She said calmly, "Ben, leave." The next morning, I received $500,000 in my account from Tina. No note, no explanation. But I knew its purpose. It was compensation for Eric's actions. I was no longer the naive 18-year-old dreaming of justice. I accepted it quietly and returned a simple thank you. Once I'd healed, Tina looked at my face and laughed. "Ben, I thought you'd always be proud." "I've changed, Tina," I replied with lowered eyes. That night, there was a banquet Tina had arranged specifically for Eric. Since he left the country and got married, Eric's reputation had declined, and Tina intended to use her connections to help him out. During the event, Mike, Eric's longtime rival, raised his glass. "Eric, weren't you supposed to become royalty's son-in-law? Why are you back like a stray dog?" Eric's complexion instantly turned pale. Mike got someone to bring over a bottle of strong liquor and pushed it towards Eric. "Tonight's party, I know what Tina's up to. So here's the deal, Eric, you finish this bottle and we're square. All past grudges between us are gone. Besides, if you plan to develop your career back home, I might even lend you a hand." Eric's eyes were red as he looked at Tina, on the verge of tears. "This is strong liquor. I'll die if I drink it all." "Tina, didn't you promise to always protect me?" Tina gently held Eric's hand and looked at Mike. "Eric used to be stubborn and did offend you, so it's understandable if you want to let off some steam. How about someone else drinking it as an apology?" She paused for a moment and looked at me. "Ben, go ahead and drink it, then apologize to Mike." Mike leaned lazily against the back of his chair, with an amused expression. "If your husband agrees, I have no objections." The wound on my face hadn't fully healed yet, and the doctor specifically advised against drinking. I froze in my seat, clenching my slightly trembling wrist, and exchanged a silent glance with Tina. She said calmly, "I'll have my assistant transfer $1 million to you afterward." The atmosphere was tense for a moment. I stood up, took the bottle and drank it down. The intense burning sensation of the liquor spread from my throat to my stomach. The overwhelming alcohol fumes surged upward, making my eyes water uncontrollably. Mike's cronies clapped and jeered. "Wow, what a drinker. Tina's husband really loves money." "Huh? What, were you dirt poor in your past life?" The sarcasm was obvious. After I finished, I put down the bottle and bowed deeply to Mike. "Mike, I apologize if I ever offended you." Mike toyed with the glass in his hand and chuckled. $1 million. Tina's really generous." "Well then, Eric, our grudges are settled." Outside the banquet hall, in the dimly lit restroom, an eerie fragrance lingered. I clung to the toilet, vomiting violently. My stomach and throat had numbed from the pain, and it wasn't until I noticed traces of blood in the vomit that I realized I might be seriously hurt. Mustering the strength in my aching body, I called 911. It wasn't until the 4 was hooked up that I received a call from Tina. "Where are you? How can you get lost from puking after a drink? Or are you just acting up?" Her tone hinted at her irritation. I paused and replied, "I'm at the hospital getting in 4. She laughed. "Living with me all these years has made you quite spoiled." I said nothing, just stared at the overhead fluorescent light. Maybe it was the glare, but tears filled my eyes. "I'll send a driver to pick you up from the hospital later. No one else takes care of you like I do." With that, Tina hung up. Back then, she hurt her leg and ear saving Eric. Eric left her and went abroad, and I married Tina in his place. Since Tina was paralyzed, we never had a marital life. I was just her caregiver, despite being her husband in name. When I got home late at night, Eric was already asleep. Tina was waiting for me in the study. She'd had some drinks and looked at me hazily. "The money has been transferred to your account." "Okay. Ben, don't blame me. Eric's never really suffered before, unlike you." I sniffled and quietly said, "I understand, Tina. Next month, I'd like to go abroad to see an art exhibit. Is that okay?" Tina smiled, of course. "Ben, you see, your so-called dream is only worth this much, right?" I said yes, probably feeling the effects of alcohol. She leaned back in her wheelchair, closing her eyes in exhaustion. Watching her face, which bore a slight resemblance to what I remembered. I reached out, removed her hearing aid, and whispered hoarsely, "Linda." Just that one word, and tears started falling uncontrollably. It's been 7 years. Please let me find you next month. Okay? Maybe since I was finally going to look for her. That night, I dreamt of Linda again. We grew up in the same orphanage. She was always brave and had a strong sense of justice. She became a SWAT police officer. I wanted to learn painting and take the art school entrance exam, and she'd send me all her earnings. Go to a better art studio, and don't be stingy with materials. She'd visit me at school, ruffle my hair, slip me a card, and say, "Chase your dreams, Ben. Leave everything else to me." I wanted to become a famous artist so I could make Linda proud. But Eric ruined it all. The second month after my fingers were broken, Linda returned from a mission. She nearly lost it. She was the team's sharpshooter, bullets never missing their course from miles away. But holding me, her hands trembled uncontrollably. Her voice was laced with anger. "I'm gonna kill them." "Don't say that, Linda." I nestled into her shoulder, closing my eyes in exhaustion. "I'm so tired. I just need a nap." My injuries were healing slowly, and Tina constantly sent people to mentally break me. Every day I woke up from nightmares and pain. Only when I leaned into Linda's embrace and smelled that familiar scent did I finally relax. Eric was too powerful, with the alliance of Linda's family backing him. They produced evidence of Eric's mental illness and gave me a large sum as medical compensation. Linda would fiercely defend others, risking her life. But with Eric, she was helpless. Once I recovered, she returned to her duty. Before she left, she held me and promised, "One day, I'll make sure Eric pays for everything. Believe in me, Ben." I nodded with all my might. I always believed her. I just never got the chance to see her again. With Tina's relentless help, Eric perfectly integrated into the social circle within half a month of returning. The night before I left for abroad, I drove them to a business meeting, planning to head back afterward. I had a flight early the next morning. Softly, I told Tina, "Boss Lou, I'm heading home to rest." She nodded faintly, but Eric suddenly spoke, "Hold on." Holding a glass of red wine, he slightly tilted his head and looked at me. "I heard you're going abroad for a painting exhibition? Your hand's useless, you can't even hold a brush. Ben, why still dream of becoming a great artist?" Ignoring him, I continued towards the door. He smashed the wine glass against my back, spilling wine all over my clothes. "Did I say you could leave?" Eric lowered his voice. "Get back here. You're helping me drink tonight. People like you, you're born to serve." I froze, not moving an inch. Tina sighed softly, helpless but indulgent. "Listen to Eric, Ben, or I'll have to cancel your flight ticket for tomorrow." At that moment, I suddenly thought of Linda again. Back when we were in the studio, the first time Eric humiliated me in front of everyone. He pinched his nose from meters away and loudly said, "Gosh, it stinks. How can someone like you dare to share a studio with us?" That night I called Linda. Is there really a hierarchy of humanity? She was on a mission at the time. The car window was down. The wind from the fields blew into my ear through the receiver. Linda's voice was slightly muffled, but it seemed filled with thunderous power. "Ben, all people are equal, no matter where they are born or raised. For instance, right now, the same moon shines on all of us." Under Tina's protection, no one dared to mention Eric's messy divorce. Everyone praised him. I heard he's famous abroad, a renowned painter and artist. His paintings are priceless. Even royal families bid for them. Eric was pleased, smiling gracefully. "You all flatter me. It's just a little painting talent." He's allergic to alcohol, so I drank for him. That night, I vomited several times, broke out in a rash all over my neck. On my way back, I overheard some people whispering, "Isn't the man with Eric the son-in-law from Linda's family? They look so alike." Son-in-law? More like a servant. He's sold himself for money, lost all dignity. This knockoff will soon be kicked out, won't he? They laughed, eyes full of contempt. I was drenched in cold sweat, leaning against the wall, catching my breath. Checked my phone. Tina had sent another million. I put Moonlight in the Wilderness in the art exhibit. Eric isn't in a good mood. Don't blame him. I know. He's been hosting an exhibit and someone offered a huge sum for a piece just like Moonlight in the Wilderness. But he didn't paint it. It was after a phone call with Linda, on a night when I was 17, that I stayed up all night to create it. Later, I sold it for $20,000 to raise money. After I married Tina, I found out she was the anonymous buyer. The wind of the wilderness has shape. The moonlight shines equally on every piece of land. That's something someone like Eric, who labels others inferior, could never capture. Year 7. I finally found the photographer who captured that picture. Do you know where he is now? He shook his head. Seeing my disappointment, he hesitated, then lowered his voice. Actually, I shot him again 6 months ago. I stiffened. The place where I took it is dangerous. If I reveal it to you, I'll have to leave immediately and move overseas. If you want it, you'll have to pay a high price. I was short $2 million. Back home, I went to Tina. Before I could speak, Eric laughed. You really think you're worth that much? I ignored him, locking eyes on Tina. Tina, any demands, just name them. She met my desperate gaze, slightly stunned. But she still said, Ben, Eric isn't happy lately. I need to comfort him. This decision rests with him. Eric looked at me, slowly laughed. Ben, don't you pride yourself on having more talent than me? Don't you look down on us rich folks? Want money? Sure. Get on your knees and beg. When I knelt in front of him, my lips were raw with bloodstains. Eric suddenly burst out laughing. Really believed that, huh? So stupid. He squinted. Gotcha. When I broke your hand, your sister pleaded just like you did, looking to hold me accountable. Little did she know I was in the next room watching. Your sister and you are both naive fools. She died, didn't she? His grin was sinister, like a poisonous blossom, destructive yet breathtakingly beautiful. What sweet justice. The string in my mind snapped all of a sudden. When I came to, I had already grabbed him by the hair, smashing his head into the table, biting his shoulder, wishing I could tear a chunk out. Eric had never endured such suffering. He cried tears of pain, but he was too pampered, couldn't match my strength. Ben, have you lost your mind? He struggled to push me away, hysterically shouting, You rabid dog. In the end, it was Tina, sitting in her wheelchair, who called the maids and butler. Her face was cold. The fake warmth she always wore was gone. Ben, you've been in this marriage for 7 years and still don't know propriety? Have I spoiled you too much, letting you step out of line? They forcibly dragged me away, mouth full of blood. Eric was livid. He slapped me twice, then ordered others to haul me into the bathroom. A tub full of cold water awaited. I was forced under, water filling my nose and eyes, shaking and convulsing. As I was about to pass out, my hair was yanked back and shoved down again. Right before losing consciousness, I wondered, when Linda fell into the ocean, was it like this? Was it this hopeless too? Did she think of me then, too? Eric lost control. In the end, I was rushed to the hospital. Suffered a grave illness. As compensation, Tina sent $3 million. She said, It's more than you asked for, so stop causing trouble, Ben. I couldn't bother arguing with her. I sent the money in hopes of buying that photo, but the money was returned. The photographer's account was deactivated. I sat numbly in the hospital. Sunlight like molten gold streamed through the window pane onto me, yet it felt like I couldn't sense any warmth. Time passed unknowingly, and the door to my hospital room was knocked. I looked up and saw a serious-faced middle-aged man. The day I was discharged, he took me to an unremarkable, secret little building. It's dangerous. You shouldn't look for Linda anymore. We can't reach her, he said. Whether she's alive or not, we'll know in about a month. I stared at him blankly. So, she's not dead? I asked. Not before. Now, I don't know, he replied. Her mission was dangerous. A week ago, we lost contact with her. I asked, my voice shaking, why didn't she let you tell me? Linda knows you got married to Tina, he said. She didn't want to disturb your life, so she let you think she died 7 years ago. As I left the building, The sky grew dark. I looked at the fading twilight and felt like life was playing a huge joke on me. When I returned, Tina was sitting in a wheelchair, waiting in the villa's yard. Seeing me, she spoke seriously. "Where did you go after the hospital? Are you mad at me, Ben?" Her expression was proud, with hidden annoyance. Honestly, her face, sharp after all she and Linda went through, bore a faint resemblance. I just missed Linda so much. Even that small resemblance was enough to pull me from suffocating despair. But after today, it seemed meaningless. I walked past her in a daze, ignoring her. But my wrist was grabbed. "If it's about Eric, I admit I favored him a bit," she said, trying to sound gentle. As if she was making a huge concession, she added, "As compensation, I'll have my assistant send you more money. Just stop causing trouble." I didn't respond, just stared into the distance, watching the setting sun slowly swallowed by the distant mountains. As night fell, I quietly said, "Tina, let's divorce." She frowned and warned me, "These years, I've spoiled you, made you forget your place. Without me, who else would give someone like you so much money?" I laughed, covering my face. "What's the use of money for me?" "It's useless," I replied. "Have you forgotten how you begged me before?" Ignoring her, I left the prepared divorce papers in her study and moved out of Linda's home. Time passed day by day. A month later, I received an invitation from the orphanage I once called home to attend their charity event. Initially, Tina thought I was just throwing a tantrum and didn't want to give me more ground. Then she seemed to realize I was serious and started trying to win me back. "Stop it, Ben. Come back, and I'll have Eric apologize to you personally," she pleaded. I never replied. On the day of the charity event, I stepped on stage and immediately spotted Tina in the audience. She was staring intently at me. The host said, "We've heard that Ben grew up at this orphanage and later made numerous donations." Yes, I nodded. "I want future kids to have it better. It's what Linda did after graduating. When she left, I took over. As far as I know, Ben had a sister here, Linda, who went on to an impressive career." The host asked. Hearing her name stunned me. I scanned the room, fixing my gaze on a shadowed corner. My heart began pounding wildly. Finally finding my voice, I said, "Not a sister. She wasn't my sister. Linda's 6 years older than me, but I never called her sister because I liked her." Across the room, Tina looked pale in her wheelchair. Every bit of passion and sincerity I had was always saved for Linda alone. The host was taken aback. "But Mr. Ben, you seem to have been with Tina, who is here today." "Just a transaction," I replied. "We're divorced now. I appreciate Tina for what she gave me over the years. That financial cushion helped me search for Linda. Alive or dead, I have to find her. In my heart, she'll always be a hero." Saying this, I avoided looking at Tina, whose eyes had grown red. Instead, I fixated on the dim corner as a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the light. She had lost so much weight, her cheeks slightly sunken in, with visible wounds all over her exposed skin. But her sharp, cold eyes sparkled like stars, softening the moment she saw me. "Now you've found me," she said. I almost thought I was dreaming again until Linda's warm fingers brushed my hand. Her voice was different, hoarse and slightly garbled, as if her vocal cords had been damaged. I remembered the middle-aged man's words. These past 7 years, she'd been on a dangerous mission. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. "I'm sorry, Ben," Linda gently said before turning to address the crowd. "I'm Linda. I've grown up at Sunshine Orphanage. The kids here might not have noble origins, but they can still contribute to the nation and humanity. I thank you all for your generous donations on their behalf." She deeply bowed. Upon straightening, she started coughing uncontrollably, a trickle of blood at the corner of her lips. In that moment, I realized how seriously she was hurt. She rushed here just to see me. After the charity event ended, Linda was taken to the hospital. As I moved to follow, Tina's assistant suddenly stopped me. "Sir, Ms. Tina wants to see you," she said. I frowned. "I've divorced Tina. We're done." "I haven't signed the divorce papers, so we're still legally married," Tina's voice interrupted. I turned to see Tina in her wheelchair, eyes usually proud and aloof now filled with panic. Ben, come back to me. I can overlook everything you just said in front of so many people. I smirked. Who needs your forgiveness? I replied. Linda's back. I no longer need your money to search for her. Step aside. I need to get to the hospital. My words were blunt, driven by urgency to see Linda. For once, genuine hurt crossed Tina's face. She asked with teary eyes, "Did you ever love me?" "Of course not," I answered. She closed her eyes for a moment. "These 7 years you've stayed by my side, willingly playing Eric's stand-in, putting up with everything without complaint. Isn't that because you love me? Ben, do you even have a heart? This is just ridiculous. You treat me like a servant, let Eric torment me, and the compensation I get is about the same as the price of a bag for Eric. I've been acting all humble and obedient in front of you for 7 years, feeling disgusted for 7 years. You don't even show me the basic respect. Tina, you should be thankful you're seriously rich, otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen to make money with you. She's seriously fragile." Just a few words like that and she's almost in tears. I left Tina and turned away. This time, her assistant didn't try to stop me. When I got to the hospital room, Linda was already hooked up to N4. She had countless wounds, some even festering. "I escaped by boat," Linda explained quietly. "After I got the most crucial evidence, I was exposed. They chased me, trying to stop me from bringing the stuff back home. I couldn't use a phone card or the internet, or I'd get GPS tracked. All I could do was rely on my memories from 7 years ago to find the doc. Just those few words were enough to shake me. My heart felt like it was being squeezed tight. I struggled to ask, what about now? You're showing up at public events like charity fundraisers. Could they? Of course not." Linda hesitated, gently holding my hand. "I'm back now, it's safe." I bit my lip and nodded, not wanting to take my eyes off her for a second. "I've missed you for so long, Linda." Under my gaze, she suddenly hugged me tight. "It was hard, wasn't it? Ben, I'm sorry. For these 7 years." Her voice used to be so pleasant, clear and appealing. But now it's hoarse and unpleasant. I asked, "Why is your voice like this?" Her embrace stiffened slightly. I said, "Linda, stop hiding things from me." She paused, then softly said, 5 years ago, after they used me for drug trials, it became like this. A long, long time ago, I was tricked into a small room with a candy by the headmaster of the orphanage. She climbed over the wall to bring in the police. During that time, I used to stare at the sky blankly. Linda stayed with me, singing softly in my ear. The doctor said I'd been traumatized, that I should try using something to rekindle my interest in the world. Linda ran out and shined shoes to get my first art supplies. My first drawing was of me and Linda under the big banyan tree at the orphanage. She is a part of my life, an inseparable presence. In these 7 years, there hasn't been a moment I didn't think of you. I rested my head on her shoulder, tears streaming down my face. "Don't leave me again. I thought after you married that person you'd be doing well." Linda said, "It's my fault, Ben. I shouldn't have made you worry like this, but we can't be together." I suddenly lifted my head, staring blankly at her. "For so many years, I've always seen you as just a brother. Just like years ago," she gently stroked my hair. "What she said was brutal. Even though I have my biases against that person, you've been married to her for 7 years. If she was good to you, don't lie to me." I cut her off. "I know you better than you think, Linda. When you lie, you get nervous, your ears turn red, and you don't dare to meet my eyes." Linda suddenly stopped. She quietly looked at me. Her eyes, usually sharp and striking, were like a calm and gentle lake, full of sadness. "To me, she's always been brave and righteous." She said, "Those drugs didn't just ruin my voice, Ben. I got exposed to radium without any protection. Years ago, I read a book called The Radium Girls. In the early 20th century, those factory workers who were exposed to radium on watch dials. Their bones still glowed an eerie blue light 100 years after they died. That's the deathly glow from the radioactive element radium. How did Linda end up touching it? About half a month later, I finally found out why. 7 years ago, when she went to rescue hostages kidnapped by pirates, she fell into the international sea. But luckily, she was rescued and brought back ashore. And by some twist of fate, she learned something. Many people who've disappeared quietly in our country over the years are linked to a secret overseas human drug trial lab. She contacted her superiors back home and, after discussions, they decided she should find a way to stay there as an undercover agent. Because the issue was so huge, the mission was given the highest confidentiality level. She couldn't tell anyone. I saw citizens of our country, tricked with promises of high-paying jobs. They happily went along to become test subjects for those people. What those drugs did to people was beyond ordinary imagination. Linda gritted her teeth, her expression in pain. There were countless times I wanted to shoot them, but I couldn't. All these years, she was the only one to successfully penetrate that lab. She even paid the price of radiation exposure to root out those devils. The turmoil in the following months isn't something someone like me, a regular person, would get involved in. Because of the confidentiality agreement, even Linda couldn't know everything. I just saw on TV while I was with her for treatment in the hospital. Our country's police had spent years gathering critical evidence. They took down several major groups secretly colluding with foreign labs, arrested multiple powerful accomplices, rescued hundreds of missing citizens over the years. Some were tortured by drugs, left scarred and broken. Some are forever buried in foreign soil. I'm luckier than them. Missions like these are usually a one-way trip. Linda coughed up blood, her expression calm as she wiped it away. If I died there, as long as the evidence and list made it back home, I wouldn't have any regrets. Except for you. Since news always leaked, they suspected her every once in a while. To prove her loyalty, I offered to take the medicine. When I came in contact with Radium, I didn't feel anything physically. But my mind suddenly thought of you. In my memory, Linda wasn't much of a talker. But while I stayed with her in the hospital, she had a lot to say, as if she wanted to fill the 7-year void. The day Linda was discharged, I got stopped in the hospital's garden. Tina was still in her wheelchair, looking a bit cold. "Ben, I've let you go for too long. It's time to come home." I frowned. "We're divorced." "I never signed the divorce papers," she replied with that annoying fake friendly mask again. "There's a business dinner tonight. As my husband, you should come with me. Everyone's eager to meet you. You can take Eric," I suggested. Tina softened her tone. "I know you've always been jealous of Eric, but now his gallery business doesn't need my help anymore, and he promised he wouldn't bother you again." I didn't want to argue with her and started to leave. "Ben, even if you were Eric's stand-in for me, what about you? Were you not making me a stand-in for Linda?" I suddenly turned my head back. Under the blood-red glow of the sunset, there was a hint of vulnerability in her expression. I took a deep breath. "Tina, stop flattering yourself, okay? You're not even close to being her stand-in." As soon as I said that, I realized Tina was staring coldly at something behind me. So I turned around and saw Linda. She'd changed out of her hospital gown into a sharp suit, covering all the unhealed wounds. Her face was pale, her lips barely had any color, and her eyes were sharp and intense. Though thin, she looked like a weapon ready for battle. The warm sunset stopped at her side, completely separate from her sharp, chilling aura. Compared to Tina's self-satisfied arrogance, they seemed like they were from two different worlds. I was right. Tina didn't deserve to be mentioned in the same breath. "Tina," Linda walked over, took my hand, and looked down at Tina in her wheelchair. "I might not have your money or power, but I do know a couple of lawyers. Don't sign the divorce papers? Then we'll go the litigation route. A marriage without genuine feelings should have ended a long time ago." Tina seemed to forget she was the one who approached me, proposing marriage. Back then, her tone was gentle, but her eyes were cold and disdainful. "You do look like Eric, but you'll never be in his league. As long as you don't get any wild ideas, I'll pay you more than you could earn in a lifetime." Now, the delusional one had become her. Tina looked intently at Linda, scoffing. "What can you give him? A small-time cop? I came to take him to a business dinner to introduce him to some networks." Just then, Linda took out a gold-embossed invitation and handed it to me. Squinting at Tina, "What?" Just a dinner? Is that rare? The invitation was arranged by my boss, telling me something might need confirming there. On our way, Linda told me. I was a bit anxious. Will there be any danger? No, just confirming something, she said with a gentle smile, tousling my hair. Don't overthink it. Now that I'm out, it's good to unwind with you. The banquet hall was lavish. In those past 7 years, I often accompanied Tina to such events, meeting all sorts of people, yet always feeling dull inside. But walking with Linda now, there was not a hint of that joy. The guests were elites from different industries. Linda introduced me to a few people she knew. That's when I found out. Among the hostages she saved from those pirates were some rich kids partying on a sea yacht. Their families were very grateful to Linda. After greetings, as we turned, we ran into Mike and his gang. He whistled at me. Well, isn't it Tina's husband? I heard you're getting divorced? Still need money? Down another bottle and I'll give you $1 million to hire a lawyer. Halfway through his laugh, he went silent like a strangled chicken, because Linda picked up a dining knife from a nearby table and casually held it to his neck. Mike's expression was a mix of anger and fear. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? Linda countered, leaving him uncertain. No idea whose rich daughter you are. Tell me. None of that. Linda smiled slightly. But hey, a dying person wanting to take someone with them is pretty normal, right? A pampered rich kid like Mike fears little except those indifferent to life and death. He left with his crew, tails between their legs. I looked at Linda. Next time, don't talk about dying. The doctors did say your condition's improving. Some wounds are even starting to heal. She let out a soft sigh, almost unnoticeable. That's on me. I'm sorry, Ben. Since she came back, she said sorry countless times to me. But she could never change the outcome destiny had in store. I sniffed and looked down. I just want you to be a little happier while you're here. Linda promised me. She went to get me a small cake, but vanished in the crowd soon after. As I scanned the room, a wave of anxiety swept over me. I wanted to find Linda, but Tina popped up again like a bad penny. She looked at me. Ben, if I apologize for everything before and make it up to you, will you come back to me? No. Tina's lashes trembled, and there was actual pain in her eyes. Ben, I regret it. I never admitted it, but when I bought Wild Fields back then, I've liked you since. I interrupted, fed up, but Wild Fields was never painted for you. You aren't worthy of its meaning. 5 years into marriage, late one night, Tina grabbed my hand, her old scar from Eric making her pinky curl slightly. She sighed. It's a shame these hands can't draw anymore. I pulled my hand back and covered it with my sleeve, saying flatly, I just wasn't lucky. You should check out Eric's recent work. Pretty good too. She chuckled. Yeah, you're right. She ruined my future, brushing off everything casually. And now she's here, pretending to bear her cheap emotions to me. But I really love you, Ben. It's just Eric and I grew up together and I'm so used to him. I didn't listen to the rest of her spiel, because Linda finally walked in from the hallway, coming towards me. I rushed to her without giving Tina another glance. So I didn't see the fierce look in Tina's eyes as I turned away. On the way back, I asked Linda, did you find what you were looking for? She nodded, a bit apologetic. Sorry, Ben. I said I'd help you relax, but ended up ruining the party mood. I never really enjoyed these places anyway. I hooked Linda's finger quietly. Linda, don't feel like you'll mess anything up by coming back. That's not the life I envisioned. All those fancy parties and extravagance. Spent 7 years in that world and never felt right, not even for a second. I always thought of Linda and the moonlight when I was 17. I only belonged to the world where she was. Don't feel guilty. This top secret mission is so important. Any mistake would be catastrophic. You didn't tell me anything because you couldn't. A failed mission would be on me, not you. Pausing, I softened my voice. I've grown up. I'm not that kid who begged for help when I broke the principal's vase. Not the 18-year-old who cried in her arms after injuring my hand. Back then, we felt so powerless against the world Tina and Eric represented. Lucky it's all in the past now. Linda laughed. At the charity event, you only called my name. But who used to chase after me calling me sis? I blinked. Back then was different. Now I see you differently. But if you want me to call you that at certain times, I could. Sis. I halted, turned, cupped her face, and kissed her. I'm gonna kiss you now. The moonlight that night was so gentle. The wind rustled the leaves on the branches. Linda didn't push me away. Her body stiffened for a moment until I bit her lip, dissatisfied. Then she wrapped her arms around my waist and took charge. She never wore perfume, just the scent of laundry detergent, mixed with a faint hint of blood. I remembered she was still injured and mumbled, "Careful with your wound. It's okay." Instead, Linda held me tighter. A bit of pain is good. In a way, Linda and I were alike, using pain to remind ourselves we still lived in a world without each other. The long kiss ended, mingled with our breath. On the dark asphalt road, our shadows merged into one. Just like many years ago when I escaped the orphanage and got lost at night. I walked that road with her by my side. Last month, I saw a doctor. He said my hand wouldn't fully recover, but I might be able to paint again with some treatment. I told him I have so many ideas, so many things I want to draw for you. So as long as we're alive, our future days will be worth looking forward to. That night, I sincerely believed Linda and I had a future. But fate always has other plans. A month later, someone disappeared again. And all signs indicated the circumstances were very similar to those who vanished before. We were wrong. That case wasn't over. Linda stood in the sunlight streaming in from outside, her face serious. "Ben, at that party, I was on a mission. And I saw someone who shouldn't have been there. I had a bad feeling." "What do you mean? Someone who shouldn't be there?" Linda gazed deeply into my eyes. It took a while before she spoke softly. "He was supposed to be executed 2 months ago." Linda started leaving early and returning late on missions again. I began trying to pick up a paintbrush once more. After so long, I was a bit rusty at first, my lines shaky with trembling hands. But gradually I got back into it. Tina bought Moonlight on the Wilderness. I wanted to paint it again, the moonlight and wind from when I was 17. But before I finished, Linda's mission had a major breakthrough. She didn't tell me the details. Her expression was serious when she handed me a photo. 7 years of work, and yet we couldn't dismantle this human trafficking route completely. Linda explained, "You knock one side down and another pops up. This world always has places untouched by sunlight. Destroy one patch of darkness, and another fills in." I never expected the person in the photo to be Eric. I hadn't seen him in a long time, just heard bits about him occasionally. Heard his art shows were now in other countries with a gallery abroad gaining major success. In just a few months, he became the acclaimed genius painter. Selling paintings was just a facade. He used it to connect with key people. Linda got busier. The deeper she delved, the more shocking the truths that surfaced. But the intense work took a toll on her health. Her body, already compromised by radiation, was deteriorating rapidly. And it wasn't just Eric. Others were involved too. When she mentioned the last 2 words, her voice was chilling, and Tina, the one in charge, had been involved in these illegal businesses since half a year ago. After Eric came back, she used him to connect with the mysterious organization he met abroad. At this point, Linda's voice stopped. She turned her head, coughing violently. The room started filling up with the smell of blood. The moment it hit my nose, my heart felt like it was pulled up to some never-ending high platform. She casually wiped the blood from her lips and kept talking. "We've got some evidence now. We just have to wait for them to meet the target next time, and we can nab them all." Outside, it was pouring. Thick clouds covered the sky, blocking everything. After a good while, a bit of golden light wobbled through a gap in the clouds. I always remember it as just another normal morning. Before Linda left, I was pestering her for a kiss. Even after living together so long, we hadn't gone beyond that. She said, "Until everything's settled and I'm sure I can make you happy. I won't make any promises, Ben." I was pretty upset then and snapped back at her a little. The few times I showed a temper were all because she let me get away with it. Linda just looked at me and smiled, helpless but indulgent. Her smile twisted my heart, making it ache and tighten. I sniffled, trying to act tough. "Fine, If that's how you feel, I won't force it. Once the mission's over, get ready to be locked in the room for 3 days. Linda blushed as she left. I lay on the bed zoned out for a bit, got up to head to the art room next door, and noticed a few paint colors were out. On my way to buy more, it was still raining. People without umbrellas rushed to find cover, splashing water everywhere. No one paid me any mind. That's why when a black car suddenly stopped by the curb and pulled me inside, I didn't react. The last thing I noticed was the smell of alcohol and I passed out. When I woke up, I saw Tina. "See, Ben, what makes you think your precious Linda is any better than me?" She smiled. "She gave up on you, chose saving those strangers before you, letting me snatch you away." At that moment, a lot clicked. When Eric got back in the country, he didn't have a great rep. Back then, he ditched Tina when she got hurt for his sake and left to marry abroad. Tina, being in such a powerful position, wouldn't help her without bigger motives at play. Once I got it, I chuckled. That's where you can never beat Linda. Justice and courage are part of Linda's essence. I've always loved her for who she is. Tina's face went ice cold. That evening, Eric came in. From their argument, I learned Linda set a trap. After tightly monitoring all docks and airports for a while, they eased up on purpose. Their guys rushed to get the goods on board, falling right into the trap. I didn't think they'd make such a bold move. Clearly, they were determined to root us all out. Eric's usually handsome face looked twisted in anger. A bunch of lowlifes who wouldn't contribute anything alive were doing them a favor selling them for drug trials. His gaze shifted to me, suddenly realizing, "How'd you get him here? You know they're searching the whole city for him, right?" Tina coolly said, "I'm taking him with me." Eric was in disbelief. "Tina, are you crazy? He's a low-grade copy. Do you know how much more complicated it makes our escape?" Without flinching, Tina replied, "I like him, so I'm taking him." The following days, Tina kept me locked in a secret villa. Those saved hostages led to a trail that would eventually link back to these two masterminds. So they started planning an escape. Most of Lou's assets were already moved overseas over time. One night, Tina, slightly tipsy, rolled her wheelchair up to me, looking misty-eyed. "The divorce isn't finalized. We're still technically married." She added, "Ben, once we're out, we can start over. You stuck with me for 7 years. I won't treat you like before. I'll make up for all the mistakes in the rest of my life." She went on about some ideal future, but I just looked at her coldly the whole time. Maybe she snapped and brought up Linda. "That Linda, she's been trying to find you. But without proof that I took you, she's stuck. And she's afraid I'll destroy the evidence she wants." I bit my tongue to clear my head and spoke for the first time that night. "What evidence?" Tina glanced at me, a faint smile, "A list, a ledger. But she'll never get her hands on it. I'll allow you 1 tear for Linda, who's as good as gone." For the next few days, Tina and Eric were busy prepping for their getaway. I was locked in a small, windowless room thinking of ways to get that list and ledger Tina mentioned. Tina was always too proud to lie to me. That evidence must be critical. I started creating opportunities. After 2 days of high fever, Tina brought in a trusted private doctor for an 4 and moved me to a bedroom. When my fever wouldn't break, I felt a hand gently smoothing my hair. "Ben, even sick, I won't let you go." I blinked my eyes open, feverish and flushed. "Don't be pathetic, Tina." She chuckled. "I prefer your feisty self over the one who just went along with everything. You were born with a silver spoon, everything handed to you. Why, then, would you betray your own for such vile deeds?" Tina calmly replied, "Doctors here and abroad said I'll never walk again. But I want to stand. They promised that with enough testing, they could make a guaranteed drug." I was about to say something when headlights flashed outside the window. Tina took a call, her expression changing instantly. "The police have tracked us here. They'll be here soon." She called Eric with an icy look. "Pack up, we're leaving now. There's a boat waiting at the dock." Eric shrieked, "The stuff in the room isn't packed, and those paintings need to be burned." She said, expressionless except for the wild moonlight, "Leave the rest." Eric glared, practically burning with hatred as he looked at me. As the first light at dawn broke, they finally got everything ready. Seeing me stare silently at the painting, Tina softened her voice. Ben, if you like, you can keep painting when we're safe. I gave her a glance, staying mute. A spark flickered up the villa's curtains, growing into a blazing fire. With the flames roaring behind us, Eric shoved me into a black van. As the door was about to close, I suddenly broke free and leapt out. But after only a few steps, a loud gunshot sounded behind me. A bullet ripped through my shoulder. The searing pain hit, making cold sweat drip and leaving me barely able to stand. Ben, come back. Tina's eyes pierced through the car window. Do you want to die? Come back now, and I'll get your wound treated. We'll forget what just happened. Who wants your forgiveness? I forced a grin through the intensifying pain. Have your people shoot me. I'm not going with you. Eric shouted, You think I won't kill you? Tina, if you waste more time, the boat will leave. He wants to delay until the damn cop gets here. No, he shouldn't die, I said. You two are the ones who should. Tina's face looked almost sad. Ben, you'd rather die than come with me? Yes. I nodded without hesitation. All along, I kept my left hand hidden behind my shirt. She hadn't noticed that I'd already grabbed what she so desperately wanted to smuggle away from the wild moonlight frame. A tiny USB drive, no bigger than a fingertip, cool and metallic. It held crucial evidence for the whole case. I couldn't go back because behind me were Tina and Eric, about to flee the country. I couldn't escape to safety either, since their armed henchmen could kill me and discover the evidence. I had only one way. They only indulged in shady deals, fleeing shamefully to darkness, unable to bask in sunlight. I turned and ran towards the fire lighting up the sky. As the second bullet struck my back, I stepped through the fierce flames. Fire licked up my pants, blistering my calf. I turned back, waving gently through the flames at Tina. Without words, you can't escape. Goodbye. The heat was intense, the metal in my hand scorching, nearly melting. So I opened my mouth and swallowed it. The burning metal slid down my throat, settling in the safest part of my body. I believe Linda will arrive soon. She will find it. After receiving the tip, Linda and her team rushed over. But the villa was collapsing in flames. Her face turned pale, heart pounding erratically. Once the fire was out, everything was ash. A teammate approached hesitantly. Taking a deep breath, we found a body in the fire. It was like a hammer to her chest, dizziness overwhelming Linda. The feeling of suffocation consumed her, leading to a slow realization. A feeling like something in her heart shattered to dust. Linda almost felt her own life being devastated by the pain. She stumbled over, spotting Ben, curled up like a baby on the bathroom floor, protecting his stomach. The faint marks on the ground resembling a painting. They've known each other for nearly 2 decades. She instantly grasped the picture's meaning. When they extracted the evidence from his body, a colleague gripped Linda's shoulder. We'll bring all the criminals to justice. His sacrifice won't be in vain. The USB contained thorough data, likely Tina's backup plan. Names involved, detailed accounts, funding trails. Each person's identity crystal clear. Tina and Eric were caught when their boat hit international waters. With irrefutable evidence, their arguments were futile. Their deeds over the years, leaked information, betraying fellow countrymen, warranted hundreds of deaths. Domestic turmoil lasted 2 months. To the unknowing public, it seemed a few companies collapsed, and the news featured fresh faces. But Linda knew. The dark cloud that hung for over 10 years finally lifted. She once thought she'd pay any price for this result, even her own life. But that could never include Ben's life. When she was 7 on a rainy day, Ben was left at the orphanage door. It was Linda who brought him in and adopted him. He held extraordinary meaning for her, growing from a small bundle into a stoic reed in sunlight. Gentle yet insanely resilient. Later she learned, during her perilous 7 years, Ben also endured the same torment. For a moment, she almost ignored the law to kill Tina and Eric. But Mike stopped her. Mike pressed her shoulders, his voice heavy, stern. Someone else vanished. I suspect there's something wrong with Linda's house. Mike was right. After previous connections were obliterated, Tina capitalized on the chaos through Eric's help, linking with foreign sources. In court, she and Eric received a death sentence to be executed immediately. The divorce of plaintiff Ben from defendant Tina was granted. Their marriage annulled. Tina suddenly raised her head and saw Linda seated as the plaintiff. There was a deep-seated hatred in her eyes, mixed with an undisguised icy intent to kill. On the day Tina and Eric were executed, Linda went and bought a bouquet of white roses. She took Ben's unfinished painting with her to the cemetery. He really was talented. Later, she bought the missing paints and studied the canvas for half a day, but couldn't manage to draw even one connecting line. Ben, you were meant to be a world-renowned artist. Then there was the autopsy where they found 2 bullets lodged in his body. How did that little boy, who was so scared of pain as a child, endure both the gunshot wounds and the burning agony of flames to the point of swallowing molten metal? Linda could guess. It was because of those 7 years. While he searched for a way to survive hellish missions on Earth, wasn't he also enduring the torment of being separated from loved ones and watching hope ignite only to be extinguished over and over? Now he is a hero worth remembering. Linda laid the bouquet in front of his tombstone and set that painting on fire. She breathed softly, leaning against the tombstone, eyes downcast. The pain inside her grew more intense, and she started coughing up blood. The remaining radium shattered some of her bones and destroyed her blood and cell regeneration systems. Her body had multiple stents, and the surgical wounds just wouldn't heal. Her life was meant to have ended a long time ago. Ben, in another world, show me your paintings again, Linda thought as she closed her eyes. The flames engulfed the canvas. They burned through the sky, the moonlight, the ocean, and the wind from 10 years ago.